to refresh my starter, get ready for some bread. Takes me a couple days to refresh it. This is my starter I've had about 4 years going in this crock. So I'm just gonna stir that up, get it ready. I don't make any exact measurements on this part. Just put a little into a bowl to refresh it. Nothing really that clean about this part. And I don't measure any of this, I just take eyeball it. A cup worth of flour in both. Maybe less than a cup in the crock. And I just put some regular tap water. I kind of want this to come out pretty much like waffle batter, I guess. Really what you're doing is giving the starter a chance to kind of bloom, start refreshing again. I usually do this for a couple days, so I'll wrap that in some saran wrap and just leave it out on the counter. For the start in the crock, I just put this back to a consistency that's pretty thick. I don't put a lot of water in here. There you go. That's going back in the refrigerator. With a little cleanup. And this will go onto the counter with saran wrap for 24 hours, and I'll put some more flour and water in it. Usually let it refresh a couple days. All right, it's been 24 hours. You can tell it's kind of active, so I'm going to add more flour, more water. Cover it with saran wrap, let it set for another 24 hours. So now I'm gonna mix up my dough. The starter has been going for 48 hours, so it's very active. You can see all the bubbles there. One thing I'm gonna use is some good flour, salt, starter, and I'll put some water in. Digital scale is very important. So your recipe can be really any size. It's the ratios that are important. So for me, I start with 1,600 grams of good flour. What I'm after is about a 50% moisture ratio. So if I'm using 1,600 grams of flour, I'm going to use 800 grams of water. I add just a little bit of salt for flavor, so maybe about a tablespoon. Really don't want too much salt. A lot of times you'll see folks getting really worked up about the amount of starter you put in there. I don't. I just use all the starter I have, which is quite a lot. I don't care how much it is. What I really care about is how much water I add in relation to how much flour I have. So again, 50%. So I'm gonna get 800 grams of good warm water. it up. You hear a lot of people talk about a 60% ratio, but you have to realize that the starter itself is set to 100%, so that's gonna add to this. So if you start out with 60%, you're gonna be way too much moisture. Having been making sourdough bread for a while, I do realize why. Flour was the original paste. It's very sticky without oil in it. This stuff gets sticky. But you're gonna end up with a kind of just really a mess. I'll let that sit for about 30 minutes before I really start kneading it. Give the sourdough starter time to recover. Flour and moisture to kind of equalize. So I usually get it to about this point. It looks really just like poor mixture. And I'll let that set for about a half hour right there. Just get used to the fact that this is sticky mess. So as it stands right now, this has 3 ingredients in it: flour, water, salt. Let that stand for about 30 minutes and we'll come back and knead it. Alright, so after 30 minutes, the autolapse period's over, so it's time to start kneading the bread. Scrapers will be your best friend. I made this one out of a square scraper to match my favorite bowl. And also big scrapers to clean up the area you knead with. Stuff's really sticky, so it takes a lot of work. You have to kind of work to scrape this stuff out. This stuff is really sticky. If you get the water ratio too high moisture, stuff gets really tough to work with. That was 10 minutes of kneading. You can tell how well the dough is with respect to the moisture content based on, in my experience, based on the surface that you're kneading on. If you shed a lot of dough and there's a big film that's built up here, the moisture content's too high. If your bowl doesn't come fairly clean, your moisture content's going to be off, and then the dough just won't stand up tall and strong. So just be careful of the moisture content along the way. So after I knead it for about 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes, I just let it cover until it's going to double, and then I'm going to start separating it into the loaves that I want. Alright, so as this sits here and rises, one of the things I do with my bench knife is get this off and do a fold on it. So kind of fold it back in on itself and use the surface to make sure this thing is rising up nice and tall. Keep it shaped good. Soon I'll separate this into probably 4 equal parts, but I want most of the rising phase to be done just as one big lump. So I've given this a couple hours to rise, so now I'm going to separate it into 4 pieces with my bench knife. You could use the scale if you wanted to make this perfect, but I don't really care. So now again, I'm gonna fold it. Use a little towel here if it's too sticky. And I'm just gonna kind of make sure it's got a nice tightness. And semolina flour is also your friend here once you put it into final form. So I'm gonna use a few different forms. One of them is kind of this San Francisco style. Not sure if that's originated there, but where I found it. Both semolina flour and then just let this thing rest upside down. Gotta be careful on this. Your finished surface is gonna be on the bottom. Make sure your seams are up if you want them to be hidden when you bake it. And that's ready to rest for a while. You can use regular pans too. And some semolina flour there. And this one, the fold techniques is more like a loaf. Not the seam down because you're gonna leave it in there. Semolina flour around the edges. So that one can sit. This one very. Sure, these are not the same size, that's okay. Let's mix them. Handmade. Now this is the final, really final stage of letting it rise. You can let these go for as long as you want. And to rise, the more time you give it, the more airy it is, the more it'll ferment, more sour smell and taste it'll have. And you want it more like a traditional bread, you can just let it rise for a little while and then bake it, and it's more like a traditional loaf of bread. If you give it a long time where it starts to get real thin looking on the skin, it's going to have more airy, more bubbles in it when you bake it. So, we'll let that go for a while.